Thank you. Thank you. To order. And we're going to proceed with the roll call, but in Candace's place, Keen is going to do the calling of the roll.
Thank you. We will start with city members. Regular member Carla Condon.
Here.
Let the record reflect that regular city member Gary Phillips is not in attendance, but we do expect him a little later on. And alternate member Herb Weiner is not in attendance. We'll go to the county members. Regular member Judy Arnold.
Here.
Regular member Damon Connolly.
Here.
Let the record reflect that alternate Kate Sears is not in attendance. Special district members. Regular member Baker.
Here.
Regular member Murray.
Here.
Alternate member Caius. And public members and chairman Jeffrey Blanchfield.
Here.
And I don't know if Chris Burdick, alternate member, will be here. I know there was some kind of sea level discussion up at Point Reyes today, so at the same time, of course. So we may or may not see Mr. Burdick, but roll has been taken.
Great, thank you. We have a quorum and can conduct our business. The first matter is the agenda. I am going to assume the commissioners are fine with the agenda, unless I hear a suggestion to alter the agenda set for this evening. Don't. So open time. This is the time we set aside on our agenda for members of the public to address the commission on matters that we don't have calendared for discussion this evening and that are within the realm and jurisdiction of the commission. I have no cards indicating anybody wants to speak, but if you do so, please step forward to the lectern. Okay, I'm going to move then to the first item on our agenda, and that is the consent calendar that has 7 matters on it, are both the financial report for where we are in the fiscal year now and year-end projections for fiscal year 2015-16, approval of the minutes from our last meeting, the ratification, rather, of our hiring of Rachel Jones as administrative analyst, who we were introduced to at our last meeting, approval of the meeting dates through the month of February 2016 so that we can have a clear idea of our obligations for this coming few months. And a progress report which you have on the 2015-2016 work plan, which indicates we're moving along quite well. And current and pending proposals that we must by statute set out to identify what we may be taking up in the near future. And then the Cal LAFCO quarterly report, and this is also just for information purposes.
I'll move consent.
Second.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Baker.
Yes, I did have a comment, which I believe I expressed at a previous time. Item 4 about the meeting calendar. I don't, maybe it's just me, but my own experience dealing with my agency and others, they typically set a calendar for the whole year, and then if it turns out later on they don't have a meeting, they cancel it. And I know we don't see there's any need that we're going to have a meeting every few weeks, every month or something. But why not set something and then as needed cancel it, rather than have these little incremental for 2 months and then another couple of months? I just, to me, that's a little more awkward and not consistent with what other entities do.
My understanding is we're setting the calendar that will take us up to our strategic planning retreat, which we will then be setting forth what we're going to be doing for the remainder of the year. And then we'll have that long-range calendar.
So you foresee that there will be a yearly, okay. Then
Yeah, and it's been our practice in the past. I think one of the reasons we've gone to kind of a short view is we've been holding a number of what we call special meetings, and therefore wanted to be able to have the flexibility
Okay.
to set them. But
Thank you.
we'll be doing that after we get an idea in our strategic planning retreat of our new work program, what exactly we're going to be doing and whether or not we're going to have meetings for a while on a monthly basis or go back to our one every 2 months.
We have a motion and a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Yes, Carter.
I will have to abstain on number 2, approval of the minutes. I wasn't in attendance on November 12th.
Okay, so since we've got a motion and a second, I'll ask for those who are in favor and then those who are opposed and then those who are abstaining. And you can at that time say which agenda item you're abstaining from. And we'll record it, so. Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent calendar signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any commissioner opposed? Any commissioner abstaining?
I'll abstain for article number 2, please.
Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, I'll move to our first public hearing, which is agenda item number 8, proposed reorganization to detach a property from the San Rafael Sanitary District and annex it to the Las Colinas Valley Sanitary District. This also involves a sphere of influence amendment. Keen, are you going
Yeah,
to-
no, thank you, Chair. And just up front, we did have a PowerPoint plan, but unfortunately, the system did not work for us this evening. So if you can reference your staff reports, I hopefully will have the page numbers for you as we go through it. But before the commission, as part of this public hearing, as Chair Blanchfield mentioned, is a proposal that has been brought to you by a landowner who is ultimately looking for you to greenlight a switch with respect to public sewer service providers for his unincorporated lot located at 91 Glenside Way in the Los Ranchitos Island community. And specifically what the applicant is looking for this evening, and he is represented by his consultant, Fred Devine, is that you authorize a series of boundary changes or a reorganization that would take this affected territory, 91 Glenside Way, take it out of San Rafael Sanitation District, and then add it concurrently to the Las Colinas Valley Sanitary District. A reorganization that is premised on the landowner's interest, in wanting to eliminate the operation of a private pump station that for about 20 years has conveyed and lifted sewer flows from the residents uphill and then downhill about 500 feet to the closest San Rafael Sanitation District sewer main, which is 500 feet south to Rustic Way. And the desired alternative would be then the landowner could just go ahead and gravity feed to the Las Colinas sewer main that now, after a series of infrastructure improvements, is right outside his door. So certainly the review of the proposal under state law and your own policies check out, and that includes your own policies and practices in wanting to discourage the operation of private sewer facilities like a pump station in a developing area like Ranchitos. Now, that all said, the reason why this is a public hearing is because it does require that you also make some findings and amend some spheres of influence, something that the state does not take too lightly too. In fact, if you took a literal read of LAFCO law, there is a thought that we would need to bring you a municipal service review to help inform this change. However, as we provide in the report, I think a in-spirit reading here is appropriate given you're dealing with a little less than an acre worth of land, and hopefully you'll find the analysis we provided to you in the agenda report sufficient, again, to making your findings. Again, your findings with respect to the sphere changes and then the findings with respect to the reorganization. So You have a draft resolution before you. It does recommend or provide for the approval with no additional boundary amendments, but it does include a couple of special terms of approval that I wanted to quickly highlight. The first is drawn right from your policies, and that is for you to require that this applicant record an agreement consenting to the annexation of this property to the city of San Rafael if and when it is ever proposed. And again, this is drawn from our dual annexation policy, and it comes into play because this entire island, the Ranchitos Island, is in San Rafael's sphere. And the applicant, through his representative, is agreeable to this condition. Now, the second condition is a little different, but it is a good practice and certainly one that makes sense to staff. And I'm going to have you, I think, reference attachment 3 to your staff report. This condition would be for you to require that the applicant release the easements he currently holds that affect 3 neighboring properties that are the conduit on how he gets sewer service to San Rafael Sanitation. Again, it makes sense to staff, since we're going to Las Colinas, let's not allow these kind of paper dedications to go forward. It is something a little different for this commission to consider, but hopefully we provided enough justification in the report. I do know that our applicant's representative does want to speak to that a bit, but again, this is a public hearing. We've brought you the draft resolution for your consideration. In fact, 2 of them, and be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any commission, before I open the public hearing, if any commissioners have a question of the executive officer to help clarify his report.
I've got a quick one.
Okay, Damon and then John.
It looks like the second proposed requirement is recording an agreement consenting to the affected territory's annexation to the city of San Rafael if and when proposed. That's a little bit confusing. Like, when would it be proposed?
Well, good question. So LAFCO can't initiate an annexation on its own, so it would either be proposed by another landowner, another registered voter, or the city itself. So the language itself, while a bit rough, is probably our staff's best attempt to kind of capture this externality of not being the one who actually is the entity that can control when that annexation occurs.
Okay, you know that's a sensitive subject out in
No,
Ranchitos.
and it is ironic that it just came up at one meeting after a prolonged discussion, but it is provided in your policies. This just so happens to be, I think, the first time we've done an annexation in Los Ranchitos in a number of years.
And Keen, the policy you're referring to is the dual annexation policy?
Correct, which says if a unincorporated property seeks annexation to a utility special district, that the commission concurrently require annexation to that city if it is in that city's sphere of influence. You also have in policy a deferral mechanism, which is what we're applying here, that rather than enacting that change tonight, you just simply require a recorded agreement down the line.
Yeah.
So the operative term is if.
Yes.
Yeah. In the past, when we've had these, some cities have said, we're not really ready to annex it at this time. In fact, it's not right to do that. But should we decide to do that in the future, we'd like a green light instead of a yellow light to proceed with that. And this is what that does.
Jack has a question, then I'll
Yes,
give.
okay. Jack?
Yeah, it may be in the report, and I perhaps missed it, but in addition to abandoning, or whatever the right term is, the easements that accommodate the sewer lateral, which I guess sort of a pressure lateral that goes uphill into the San Rafael system, in addition to releasing the easements, is there some mechanism here to remove or somehow get rid of the facilities that are up there, so they won't be a burden to future property owners?
It was an outstanding question. In fact, Mr. Devine and I talked about that before the meeting. The answer is no. And the reason the answer is no is there may be some landscaping, there may be some other issues on these neighboring properties of where the lines, the pipes are. And so while certainly on the surface, Commissioner Baker's comment makes sense, we were worried that we may walk you down a path of neighbor pushback.
But in my own past experience, and admittedly from a public works perspective, it's happened over and over the years where, if not the first owner, the second or third, who is doing some landscaping or maybe something fails out there, finds this old pipe that they didn't put in, somebody else did. And in most cases, it's to accommodate their own property. In this case, it's to accommodate a downhill property that, understandably, years later, because there was no sewer available when they put it in. I do recall when that was put in, when they had a failed septic system, and that was probably 25 years ago. But to leave that all in place, for it to come back and be a problem for somebody else, notwithstanding the concern about landscaping, I respect that. But to just sort of walk away from it and leave it to be a burden for somebody when we're all gone, I don't think that's the right thing to do.
Okay. Judy?
Is there anywhere in here where you say staff recommends so that we would see what we're voting on or not voting on?
Yes.
Geez, I hope. Hold on.
Page 8.
Yes. So
Okay,
it would be
good.
under alternative or alternative action 1.
Okay,
Outlines our 2 specific
Perfect.
actions.
great.
And it refers to 2 attached resolutions that follow page 16.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, just want to make sure. Judy.
Attachment, okay, page, it's not an attachment, what is it, page what?
So it's actually, so the 2 resolutions are identified as attachments 1 and 2,
Oh.
and they are located,
After page 16.
I see it, thank you, got it. These are the 2 resolutions,
yes,
thank you.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Judy?
Yes,
No,
it is,
okay.
thank you.
Craig?
Thank you, Chair. So Keen, on the property tax exchange, this is on page 7, and this might be nuance of LAFCO. So my understanding, the county crafts an agreement for the exchange. We have one Santa Fe Sanitation District basically giving up a parcel to Las Colinas receiving it, but the property tax itself will remain with the county, as well as the sanitation district now being relieved of that parcel. So what's kind of the thinking of why a district, and I think there's an agenda item later tonight too in Nevada that's kind of a similar situation, that the group that's receiving the parcel is not receiving the property tax.
So 2 parts to that answer. The first part is the context. So anytime this commission considers a boundary change, such as this evening, state law requires that your staff provide a notice to the affected agencies, and in this case there are 3, County of Marin, San Rafael Sanitation, and Las Colinas Valley Sanitary. And we provide notice saying we request a negotiated property tax exchange. But then part 2 comes into play. About 2 years ago, or about a year ago, the county, at LAFCO staff's request, created what is referred to as a master tax exchange agreement that applies to all special district annexations, detachments in Marin County. And it simply says no change will occur. And this allows proposals like this to get to you in an expedited manner. But our same notice to those agencies say, any agency can say, we don't want to apply this master tax exchange agreement. In this particular case, San Rafael, nor Las Colinas, nor the county told staff within the 30-day window that they wanted to initiate new negotiations. So that's how we've provided the report before you that says no exchange change is going to occur.
I have a question, and I apologize if it's redundant. to Commissioner Baker's question, but I don't understand what happens to the abandoned pump station
Well,
when,
so and I know Mr. Devine may speak more specifically to that, but it is on our applicant's property, and so presumably in step with their own landscaping project, that is going to be removed. There's nothing in our resolution, though, that specifies that. We could certainly go down that path, but it seems to be somewhat line of sight that they're going through this process to detach from San Rafael to eliminate the operation of the pump, then to be able to connect gravity-wise to Las Colinas. To Commissioner Condon and Commissioner Baker's comment here, or earlier comment, you can certainly add more specifying terms if you want greater assurances as to the disposition of these facilities, whether it's the pump station on our applicant's territory or the piping that is within these sewer easements. You have a lot of discretion here.
okay, thank you.
Can we come back to these questions after we've heard from the gentleman representing the applicant that may help inform our discussions? And that would be as part of the public hearing. So I'm going to open the public hearing now for this matter, and I'd like to hear from him first.
Good evening, I'm Fred Devine, I'm the architect, even though there's no architecture here. And, is this on? Nope. Now? Good evening, I'm Fred Devine, I'm the architect, even though there's no architecture here.
Or sound.
But I'm been working on different things on this property, and it's actually, this initiative came from the contractor and me, that since the driveway was going to be redone, this is a very steep site, that it was an opportunity because there didn't used to be a sewer in Glenside Way, and now there is, to connect. I made that presentation, is that 2 months ago or 3? It's when we first came on this. And just another contextual thing, this was in Las Colinas, really belongs in Las Colinas, was only pulled out of Las Colinas by the same process to allow for the pumping because of a landslide caused by the break of an MMWD pipe above. And it's now going back in. I think there are at least 2 other properties right there that are technically in the county but are staying in San Rafael for now because they pump. Up until last week, we were ready and just fine with the whole thing. And the only caveat I have to add in here is the question of abandoning the easement. The reason is we haven't had time to carefully consider it. It only came up at what I would call the 11th hour last week. And even though we knew from the start that San Rafael was in favor and Las Colinas was in favor, and we don't have a problem necessarily with it, but it needs to be carefully considered, especially when you consider that, and this is the only map I have, which came from, I think, Doris Toy to Keene. This is the property, and this is the easement. It's at least 600 feet long. I'm not even sure quite where it goes. We don't have a description. We don't have the deeded written document. I know when I'm walking up there that it appears to be going under substantial driveways and entry structures, not houses, but parts of improvements. And that's why I raised the concern, well, one, does it have to be? And second, are you going to say we got to remove the pipe? Because then we might need to reevaluate, because it's 600 feet of very difficult terrain. This is super steep. This is all very steep. And so it's possible that we need a continuance to look at this more carefully. My client is out of town, but he's fine with me talking about this. I only was able to try to get a hold of the land use attorney that had helped with some other items, Riley Hurd. Many of you may know him. He's out of town. He's responded by email and asked me for the description of the easement. Well, I don't even have it. I need to get it and maybe do a little more research here, because if it's going to be humongously difficult to do this, maybe we need to rethink the whole thing. I don't think that's it, but I understand why technically you would want to clean it up and get rid of the easements. But the removal of the pipe, and it's not a big pipe, I think it's probably just a 4-inch sewer pipe, could be very problematic. Pump station, I've heard a lot, but usually with residential, it's like it's an ejector pump. It's about this big. It's on the property. It's going to go away because it'll be in the way. It's no problem to say you're going to remove the ejector pump. It's on the property. It's not going to stay. So I'm not quite sure what to do with that. If it can be approved with, and I'm not sure how, with language that says this is still going to be considered and staff's going to work it out, that's fine. Keene said that there's maybe a deadline issue, not because of anything we feel, but if you have technical deadlines, I don't know about those. Initially, we were trying to move quickly to get the sewer in before the winter. However, and we could have done it, except Las Colinas decided, I don't know if you're from Las Colinas, but that we had to be annexed before they'd let us put initially they said we could put the lateral in and just stub it out like you do in tracks all the time. And then I guess they had second thoughts that we might cheat and actually hook up to it before we were annexed. So they said, no, you need to be annexed first. So that meant it had to happen in the spring. Otherwise, it could have gotten in. And so we can take a little more time because we can't put the sewer in quite yet anyway. So that's, unless you have other questions of me, it's really, we're fine with everything. It's this last minute thing about the easement that we just need to more carefully think about.
Keene, could you talk on the time issue? Because to me, there's some unsettled matters here.
Yeah.
For example, I think you need to look at your easement description and how it affects the deed on your land and before accepting anything.
So we had originally scheduled this for a public hearing 3 weeks ahead of the November meeting. So there was a time or a clock ticking to get this item open within the required 60 days. Now that you've opened the public hearing, you can continue this item to each meeting or to a time certain as you choose. The issue was we just needed you to open up the public hearing tonight.
Okay. And
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair?
yeah, Jim.
Yeah, before you leave, the term abandonment is misleading. There are several different, as you know. Sometimes it's just walking away, saying it's not ours anymore, as PG&E does. Sometimes it's a legal process to abandon a pump station or a pipe. And sometimes, such as my own past experience, there's a process in abandoning that actually involves physically not pulling it out, but filling with grout or some other substance. So therefore, in the future, when there's some earth settlement, portions of the pipe crack, water doesn't come down in and give some really bad problems to the downhill property or properties. So there are mechanisms. It costs a few bucks, but it's not nearly as expensive or disruptive as going to physically take it out, which that's not something I would advocate. But since you mentioned Doris Toy, who I have a lot of confidence in, I would think that she and her counterpart at Las Colinas might kind of compare notes and come up with a suitable manner of abandoning it by filling it so it doesn't come back to be a problem to one or more of those properties, uphill or downhill.
Thank you. I've known that before, but I don't deal with sewer pipes very often, and I'd forgotten that option. And yes, if everything else was fine, that would be a way to, obviously, the abandonment first is the deeded easement, and then the abandonment of the pipe by filling it with grout, which
Or a similar
obviously-
material.
or something like that, obviously already works because we know it's a pipe that works.
Yeah.
So that would probably solve that problem.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I think there's a few details they need to
I
figure
agree.
out, probably in consultation with the sanitary districts and/or a consultant to give you some advice.
Yeah, particularly one that doesn't involve, particularly in those steep slopes, digging up the pipe, which could lead to some geotechnical problems. So, Jack, are you suggesting that we put this off
Yes, I do.
till the
Yeah.
next?
Is that a motion to continue the meeting?
That's what I would move
Great.
that.
Okay.
Second.
And we
Subject
have a
to doing a
motion
little
and a
more
second.
homework on
Yeah,
this.
to continue this to the next meeting, and in the meantime, look at these two problems, and particularly if you've got a legal easement and you want to abandon it, then you may have to do that legally instead of just walking away from it.
And I think if you need my concurrence with the continuance, you're getting that.
Okay.
Yeah, as long
Okay,
as,
good.
and I would say, yes, this is fine, but it's not really the definition of that easement.
Okay, so the commission's concerns are clear to you, and you can work with the executive officer
Thank you very much.
to make it crystal clear at our next meeting,
January 14th.
January 14th.
Thank you.
Okay. But we didn't take a vote on this one, but our public hearing is still open. Anyone else wish to speak to this matter? Guess not. So, Jack, I understand your motion was first to close the public hearing, then to,
That's what I
Continue.
meant to say. You're
yeah,
more
continue
articulate
this
than I.
to the next,
Thank you.
or just continue it without closing the public
Yeah,
hearing.
let's keep the public hearing open
Yeah.
and continue it to January 14th.
Yeah, and I understand the second was to that matter
Yes,
as well.
that's fine.
Okay, so we have a motion to continue this matter to our January 14th public hearing. All commissioners in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any commissioner opposed, any commissioner abstained, we will carry it over to January 14th. Thank you, Mr. Devine.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay. Business items that propose annexation of a parcel on Wilson Avenue to the Novato Sanitary District.
Thank you, Chair. I'm confident this is much more straightforward. So before the commission,
This was
you've got
supposed to be a very rapid meeting.
I know. Trust me, I know. You have before you a proposal in which a landowner is seeking the annexation of a little more than an acre worth of unincorporated land in Indian Valley, okay, and to the Novato Sanitary District. The purpose of which is to remedy a aging septic system that currently serves 56-8 Wilson Avenue, with the added interest on the part of the new landowner of positioning them to be able to do some future intensity improvements to the property. And I did say intensity because under the county zoning, this lot cannot be further divided. It is what it is. But they could theoretically add a second unit and/or a guest cottage, and our analysis takes that into consideration. Now, because this is already in the sphere of influence, state law directs you to really just focus your attention on whether you think the timing of the boundary change is appropriate. And of course, that's what our staff report focuses in on, and that includes the state factors as well as your own policies. And we quickly get to a yes. And we think that yes gets even better if you exercise a little discretion this evening and you amend the physical annexation boundary. And now I'm going to reference page 12. We have a map here to take in all of the adjacent right-of-way on Wilson Avenue. Now, this is a little unique given, or at least relative to past proposals, because there is no sewer main on Wilson Avenue, which is usually one of the things we look at. But, and I apologize we don't have our PowerPoint because the map would better illustrate this. There is about 250 acres worth of unincorporated land to the southwest of here that is in Novato Sanitary District sphere of influence, but not in the district, okay? And so staff's line of sight is it's not happening today, but eventually a sewer main is going to go down Wilson Avenue to serve the rest of this part of Indian Valley. And so given this particular proposal is before you today, we say, hey, let's add that part of the right-of-way to make a clean boundary line for Novato going forward, Novato Sanitary. Now, unlike, and this goes to Commissioner Connolly's comment that came up at our last item, this area is completely outside the city of Novato's sphere of influence, so the dual annexation policy issue doesn't come into play. So that, the action is exempt under further review for CEQA. That's in our draft resolution. And I think we've also identified it as alternative action A for your approval. Not a public hearing, so you can take this item up and, yes.
Where is the nearest sewer on this map? Do you know?
We do. So if you look at page 12, there is a private road, not a public road, but a private road called Slidor Lane.
Yeah.
Sildor, thank you. And so the sewer actually goes all the way down to a little past the existing Wilson Creek. And so there would be no public infrastructure extension needed to accommodate service to 56-8 Wilson.
Wars have been fought in Indian Valley over sewers.
I've heard about this.
Okay. So, you know that, Jack? Yes. Do you think this is far enough away that it's not going to create a problem?
Oh, this will get Mr. Abling's attention, and a few of his friends, yeah. They get nervous even when it's a mile away.
And just to add context, and I'm sure the commission is already aware, certainly Commissioner Baker and Commissioners Arnold and Connolly, but the reason why they're looking for connection to the sewer line is if this gentleman wants to pull any type of building permit, the county is going to require connection one way or the other because it's within 400 feet of the sewer main. So again, we recommend approval with the one amendment as referenced with just normal terms and conditions.
Okay, and I don't see any representative of the applicant
Yeah,
here.
I know that Rachel reached out to the property owner and the district, and their silence suggests to me they are fine with the recommendation.
Okay.
Until it comes before Indian Valley.
Okay, Craig?
So Keen, just on the property tax exchange, so this is another example, although this is not three parties, this is two parties, I guess the county and Novato Sanitary.
Yes.
And so this is another one that needs to be expedited, and within those 30 days, there is no discussion between those agencies. I'm curious if this might be kind of precedent setting. You said there's 250 acres within the sphere of Novato Sanitary. If it just, I think sooner or later it's going to build up that, hey, we have all these new parcels, but we're not receiving the property tax. What happened? Who made those decisions to leave that with a prior agency? And maybe you could kind of speak to that.
Well, you know, again, the property tax exchange is ultimately up to the affected agencies. LAFCO only sets the property tax exchange when you do a reorganization of creating, consolidating special districts. But I think there is also a public policy consideration here in play that, you know, these are really enterprise funds. And so from LAFCO's perspective, there is justification for these annexations to occur without the receiving entity actually getting any new property tax because theoretically they are providing a service for fee. Unlike, let's say, a mosquito abatement district or fire protection where there's an indirect service being provided to the property. So I only offer that as to context as to the wisdom, if you will, of the master tax exchange agreement that is in place.
But the master tax arrangement was arranged by the special districts and the county.
Correct.
Jeff?
Yeah, great.
Keen, I did check with our district, and a small percentage comes from property tax. I think there might be varying amounts with different districts, so it's not just kind of a black and white, cut and dry, this is the policy, but we may want to look at each, and I imagine during those 30 days when the districts, and they may want to be a little more better informed. That may help us on LAFCO too, if they review this and see if that's correct for those particular agencies.
Okay, since this is not a public hearing, do any other commissioners have questions of the executive officer? And if not, is there a motion to approve, which would be, approval would be to adopt the draft resolution that's attachment 1 to this.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Sorry.
Oh, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any commissioner opposed? Any commissioner abstained?
I'll abstain.
You'll abstain. We have one abstention, Commissioner Arnold, and the motion passes. Okay, agenda item number 10 is an update on the countywide water municipal services review. For our information.
Yeah, very quickly, staff just wanted to keep this item somewhat on your burner. So we are at the goal line with respect to this countywide water study after a year's worth of work, so much to the point where we are in the queue. We are going to bring you a final report as part of a notice of public hearing on January 14th, at which time we will also bring you 2 actions for you to consider. One will be for the commission to formally accept and file the report that your executive officer has prepared on your municipal service review. And the second, if you choose, you could always continue the item, but if you choose, we will also bring you a resolution that would, among other things, codify the core recommendations and findings of the report that we went over briefly, I believe, at our September meeting. And then, of course, we may have some changes for you that we'll certainly outline, again, as part of the public hearing. But in just bringing this item to your attention, once again, we did also want to just pass along. We received about 8 or so written comments. We've attached those to your packets, and staff will address each and every one of those comments when we come back to you on the 14th. So again, just to keep this on your radar, but if you did have any questions or thoughts as we get to the 14th, whether now or offline, let us know.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Jack.
Yeah, Keen. In addition to the letters that I've been reviewing the last couple of days, and those of us that were here last summer, last spring, we remember the comments from the representatives of West Marin, BPUD, IPUD, maybe some others I don't recall, but them in particular, they weren't real thrilled, and I think, and they were working with Krista Gabriel, the manager of North Marin, it sort of in an effort, I think, to try to address a lot of your suggestions. But when we last saw them, at least my recollection, that the gap was closing, but they still had a number of things they weren't happy about. One of which, or among those, was that your data and/or assumptions differed quite a bit from their data and assumptions. Is in the intervening, I don't know, 3-4 months, in addition to the letters here, have you been able to resolve those? If not, some of them were very minuscule things about, getting the name of somebody wrong or some location, but some were pretty significant, particularly to those entities in West Marin. And I may have kind of restating what I've said before, but having worked with some of them in the past, and the managers are different, the faces are different, but some of the politics out there haven't changed dramatically. They're changing slowly, but that some of our suggestions or requirements are not well received out there. So again, have you been able to resolve those? If not to their full satisfaction, at least to largely mitigate their concerns?
Well, certainly we've got the gap has narrowed from, let's say, the initial discussion where West Marin and LAFCO staff saw a little differently. You do still, though, have a difference, And the difference lies not necessarily in a disagreement, but we're responding to different data points. Our scope of work was very clear that LAFCO staff utilize a 5-year range to make projections out, not 20 years, but just for another 5 to 10 year period. As you see in, I think in 3 of the letters, they raised that point that they would like LAFCO staff to go out 20 years, consistent with what they've done in their own analysis. Absent the commission deciding to revise your scope of analysis, we're staying with that 5-year period. I think we can do a better job at the staff level of explaining why our projections are different. Not that they're wrong or the other West Marin's projections are wrong. It's just we're looking at different data points. But I think it's consistent with the legislature saying to you and your 57 brethren in the state, you are to do these reviews every 5 years. That 5-year number resonates in our scope of analysis.
Any other?
Thank you. I think I understand what you're saying, and I do recall some of that, the time period was a large part of it, but there were a lot more specific things that I think you representing LAFCO were suggesting they do or start doing that they hadn't before, that I think they took, in addition to this difference in the data, as just not consistent with their practices or their board's directions out there. And it kind of left a very unfortunate bad feeling out there. I hope it's getting better. I never run into them directly, but I do understand the politics out there in Point Reyes and the other BPUD and so forth. It's moderated,
Yeah.
but it's very different than East Marin.
I was in Bolinas 2 weekends ago, and I did see one of their board members, and they did smile at me, and we had a nice conversation. So at least we've kept it at that level.
It's good to hear.
Keen, I also heard you say, I believe, that you're going to be responding to the comments. And my reading of the earlier comments were captured in the most recent ones, too, so that in addressing the most recent ones, you'll be addressing some of the older ones. But I think response to the comments are important for us all.
Understood.
Okay, any other questions concerning the status of the countywide water municipal service review? If not, we'll move to the next item, which is item number 11, the pending municipal service review and the San Rafael-Lucas Valley region, in the San Rafael-Lucas Valley region. Rachel?
Yes. So staff wishes to update the commission on the upcoming regional municipal service review for the Lucas Valley San Rafael area and to provide a brief overview on the pending draft scope of analysis to be presented to the commission as early as January 2016. This item follows the current study schedule adopted in June 2014, and in calendaring this study, we identified at least a total of 8 public agencies for possible inclusion in the study. And these are City of San Rafael, CSA number 6, County Service Area number 6, CSA 9, CSA 13, CSA 18, CSA 19, and CSA 23. So in preparation of the scope, staff has also identified 3 categories to focalize in the study that extend across the provided services of all 8 referenced agencies. And we have identified community development, public works, and public safety as categories that we can focus in on the study. So in addition, as with every MSR, municipal service review, the study may also inform the need for reorganization, and this can include, but is not limited to, consolidating, dissolving, or forming local governmental agencies. So staff would like to note that last MSR for the region was conducted in 2005, so possible sphere updates may be due. And in line with LAFCO's directive, we just wanted to bring to the Commission's attention two policy issues that we have viewed with the study that may need to be addressed. And the first being some boundary issues in the Lucas Valley region between Marin Wood CSD and CSA 13. The evaluations of the relationships for these two agencies and the effectiveness of their services in relation to their boundaries probably need to be considered, and interests of possible boundary adjustments have been communicated to LAFCO from community residents. The second topic has been implemented into the study by the Commission, involving outreach to the unincorporated island of the country club community. And this concerns dual annexations, as many residents continue to request outside sewer service. So in line with the study, staff would reach out to community members and determine interests of dual annexations or reasons, or better understand reasons why not to. So given this brief overview, staff now would appreciate any feedback from the Commission in regards to the working criteria or any recommendations for staff to consider moving forward.
Craig?
Rachel, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned outside sewer services and connections through possible dual annexation policy, and one of the things related to that too, as we know, in regards to the Grady Ranch in that area, is water service, and recycled water service, as I understand, goes up to Sakira Cross Street on Lucas Valley Road. So may want to look at under the public works category, that deliverable besides potable water, recycled water, and what would be effective in that area as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Damon?
Question on how you decided on the three categories.
So looking at each of the county service areas and the CSDs, we tried to, since each agency had particular services that didn't cut across or traverse each agency, we determined that these three categories would suffice in making the report cohesive and forming a good study.
And I noted in the report you indicate staff is developing working criteria.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in process. And is that something that would be brought back to us
Yes.
for review, for
Yes.
the scope?
Yes, in January 2016. So if there are any other considerations or you find any issues with these criteria, please bring it to the attention now.
Oh, meaning is there already a draft of the working criteria?
No, not yet.
Okay.
But you'll take comments up until the final draft comes out. It doesn't have to be
Exactly.
just
Oh, I
tonight.
see. Okay, yeah. All right.
Where is the country club? Which one are they talking about?
That's Point San Pedro Road. Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Jack?
Yeah, Rachel, thanks again for your presentation. I'm familiar, as I mentioned, everybody up here with some of these, but not all. Like I recognize Galenas Creek CSA 6, that's dredging of part of Galenas Creek. But could you, I don't know if you have something there, but like Las Galenas number 18, I don't know what that is. Ranchitos, I think I know. I mean, it's kind of hard to, something that's a CSA and a number, what is it? Is it a lighting district? Is
No.
it landscaping? I think a couple of these are landscaping only.
Excuse me, I did have a calendar, or excuse me, a map to present, but I will let Keen answer that.
I don't actually know
That's what we thought.
yes, I was hoping that was going to. I mean, I have a vague. You mentioned landscaping and lighting districts. I assume that's what these are. Part of this issue is We had a good report done in 2005 by our predecessors, but it focused in on the land use policies of the cities and the county. So this is really our first attempt to really dive into these districts.
Well, I would suggest at some point, before you go much further between you and Rachel, when you come back, have some little explanation what each one is. And I would observe in my past life, among the representatives of Public Works, Parks and Rec, and I think a couple other entities, they go back and forth saying, what is this thing, in the auditor's office then, because some are very little activity for years. And there's a little money accumulating, and then they go out and put in some streetlights, or plant some trees or something. So, and sometimes the board in its wisdom has passed responsibility from one department to another, and it's not always clear to the recipient department as to what they're responsible for. So I can understand your difficulty in trying to find out what some of these are. It's
And-
easier to find out how much money is in there
Right.
than what it's about and who's responsible.
So it says CSA 9 for Lucas Valley. Should that be 13?
13, we have Upper Lucas Valley.
Okay.
That's the last part of the sentence.
So maybe, Keen, you'll get us a little more information as time goes on.
Yes.
And it may not be easy to dig up.
Thank you.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but it's not in yours. That's curious.
Oh, you know what? I have a different version.
You do.
That's curious.
Oh, actually, yeah, you corrected the typo. Rather than 9, it's 19 Los Ranchitos and then 13.
Ah,
So yeah, for some reason I have an earlier version.
as you will hear during the EO report, there was also a copier machine issue the last week, and we can.
Threw me for a loop there. Yeah, so this one is correct.
So as Rachel mentioned, this is just a heads up, and we will likely come to you as early as your January meeting with a draft scope of analysis. And just like we did at the last meeting with the wastewater review of Ross Valley and San Rafael, if you're okay with it in draft form, then we send it out to the affected agencies to get their take before you take any formal action.
Great.
Okay, so this would be coming back the 14th,
As early as the 14th.
as early as the
Yes.
14th.
Be-
Okay.
Be sure you get the right affected agencies, though, because sometimes the baton has been passed from one to the other, and one or both don't know who's, responsible for it.
Well said.
Okay. Thank you much. We're going to turn to the closed session. This will be a closed session on two matters, one dealing with real property negotiations, and the other dealing with potential litigation. But the public has the opportunity before we go into closed session to address the commission on this subject. If there is anybody out there, and I don't believe there is now. So the question I have is whether we're going to stay in here, Keen, or whether we can,
No, actually, so I think we're going to stay in here. If you give us maybe a 3-minute comfort break, we'll shut down the TV, and we don't anticipate any reportable action, but we will report
we
what
will
do,
go through the
if there
process.
is.
Yeah. Okay.
Keen, not to belabor this, but I just looked it up. CSA 9 is not Lucas Valley, so let's look into that
Okay.
more thoroughly.
That may be the open space piece up there above Upper Lucas Valley. No?
According to the county website, it's actually Northbridge, which is right over by the Civic Center.
Santa Venetia.
Yeah.
Oh,
And actually, it's probably virtually very small, given that I have never even dealt with it.
nobody's complained about it yet, so.
Yeah.
So
gonna
2-minute
take a
comfort
break.
break, and
Okay.
we'll get set.
We're starting on our agenda after coming back from closed session where we discussed real property and potential new site for the LAFCO office. And we also discussed possible litigation that LAFCO would be involved in. Both matters are covered under Government Code 54956.8 and 54956.9. Does the executive officer have any report? No? Any commissioner have an announcement or report? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to close.
Second.
Motion to adjourn and second, and we're adjourned. Oh, yeah.